The forbidden sleep. The universe had one rule, an unspoken commandment passed down through every spacefaring civilization. It had been whispered in every corner of the galaxy, carefully recorded in the oldest archives, and revered by all who traversed the stars. Do not wake the humans. Simple as it seemed, it was the one truth that was universally acknowledged, even by the most powerful of species. It wasn't just a rule, it was a warning. A warning forged in the fires of ancient conflict and ingrained into the minds of every race who had ever encountered humanity. But what was so special about these fragile, curious creatures? Why were they so dangerous when asleep? Few had the answer. Even fewer had dared to question the rule. The history of the humans, or rather, the myth of the humans, was a story of destruction, survival, and strangely enough, resurrection. According to the stories, passed down through countless generations, the humans had faced their own near extinction. During their Third World War, their planet, Earth, had teetered on the brink of collapse. Resources were drained, the environment had been ravaged, and nuclear fallout had poisoned much of the world. In a last-ditch effort to preserve the remnants of their species, the human race had chosen to enter a deep hibernation. Massive colonies, filled with millions of human souls, drifted off into the void, placed into cryosleep aboard enormous ships, awaiting a future where they could start again, or perhaps a future where the galaxy might heal them. And so, humanity had been left asleep, dormant for centuries, drifting in the cold vacuum of space. Their ships became nothing more than relics, drifting through star systems, forgotten by all but the most ancient of records. In their absence, the galaxy moved on. The old wounds of war had been buried. Civilizations rose and fell, and the universe seemed to forget the fragile but fiercely resilient creatures that had once occupied it. Yet the rule remained, enforced by all who encountered the remnants of humanity's hibernation. The galactic archives, ancient and vast, were filled with warnings about the humans. Do not disturb their slumber. Let them sleep. The reasons behind this rule were not entirely clear. Some believed the humans were a threat to the very fabric of peace in the galaxy. Others said it was because the human warships were so powerful, their technology so advanced, that awakening them could send the galaxy into chaos. Still, there were those who feared humanity's sheer unpredictability, their capacity for violence, and the unknown potential they carried. No one truly understood why they should be left alone, but they agreed on one thing: never wake the humans. Chief Science Officers of the Zelith, an advanced crystalline species known for their intelligence and vast knowledge of galactic affairs, had heard the stories, of course. In fact, he'd heard them so many times that they almost seemed like part of his own history. His species had crossed paths with humans only a few times, and always at a distance. Had never personally seen a human, but the stories were all too clear. Humans were to be left alone. They were creatures of war, full of untapped potential, their power terrifying when awakened. But as with many great scientific minds, curiosity often leads one to break the rules. Stood at the control panel of his research vessel, gazing out at the holographic projection of the latest human colony ship they had discovered. It had been an unexpected find. Drifting just beyond the neutral zone in the distant quadrant of space, almost as if it had been waiting for them to come across it. The ship was old, ancient by galactic standards, but still intact. Its hull showed the wear of centuries of drifting through the void, but it remained remarkably preserved. Fascinating creatures, Zith murmured aloud, his crystalline appendages brushing against the control panel as he zoomed in on the ship. His voice resonated through his body, a sound that was both melodic and chilling to those who had heard it. They look so peaceful when they sleep. His gaze lingered on the ship's frozen form, unaware of the profound unease that was beginning to settle in his core. His crew, a mix of senior researchers and young officers, maintained a respectful distance, adhering to the established protocols. They had all been trained for these kinds of routine surveys, but even the newest of the team could sense something wasn't quite right about this particular encounter. Sith could feel his own crystalline form vibrating with discomfort, though he wasn't sure why. This wasn't just any other ancient ship. This one was different. Sith's thoughts were interrupted by Officer Zix, one of his junior researchers, fresh out of the Galactic Academy and full of youthful ambition. Zix had been a prodigy, known for his sharp intellect and boundless confidence. He had long been fascinated by human biology and their unique capacity for adaptation. Since they had first encountered the human colony ships, Zix had been relentless in his pursuit of understanding them. "Sir," Zix called out, his voice eager and a little too loud for the calm, calculated atmosphere of the ship's command deck. "I've been thinking. We have an opportunity here to learn more about the human physiology. We know so little about their biology, and this ship." He gestured at the holographic projection. "It's the perfect opportunity for a deeper study. Why not initiate a scan of their outer hull? Just a non-invasive one. We can learn so much." Zix's crystalline form darkened slightly, a warning signal that only those close to him could detect. "Zix," he began, his voice slow and deliberate, "do you understand the significance of what you're suggesting? The full scan of the ship. It's not just an artifact. It's a human vessel. We are violating the most sacred rule in the galaxy." But Zix was young, full of the confidence and excitement that only youth could bring. "It's just a routine analysis, sir. Nothing invasive, just a quick scan of the ship's structure. We won't even wake them up. It'll be fine." Zix paused, his mind racing. His instincts screamed at him to stop Zix. He had heard the stories, seen the warnings in the archives. Breaking the rule, even a little, was dangerous, terribly dangerous. But something in Zix's voice made it hard to refuse. After all, they were just going to gather some data, right? With a reluctant sigh, Zix relented. "Fine. A scan. But if there is even the slightest indication of danger." Before he could finish, Zix had already activated the command. The holographic display flickered momentarily, and the scanning beams began to extend toward the human ship. Zix watched closely, but as the scan deepened, a strange, almost imperceptible pulse rippled from the human vessel. The glow of the scan intensified, and Zix's crystalline form began to pulse erratically. The ship was not responding to the scan in the way it should have. It was reacting. "Zix, stop the scan," Zix barked, his voice filled with sudden alarm. But it was too late. The awakening. The hum of the ship's systems filled the command deck with an unsettling rhythm. Zix's crystalline form flickered as his nervous energy surged, the vibrations running through his very core as he watched the holographic display. His instincts screamed at him to stop, to pull back, but the scan had already been initiated, and the data flowing in had taken on a life of its own. Zix, oblivious to the growing tension, eagerly continued working the controls. His eyes were wide with fascination, tracing the readouts with a sense of awe that came with seeing something new. He had long studied the ancient human technology and was eager to make a discovery, to contribute something substantial to galactic knowledge. But Zix knew better. He had lived long enough to understand the weight of rules, of universal boundaries that could not be crossed without consequences. And the humans, they were a species who had earned their reputation for a reason. The legends told of their terrifying prowess, their ability to adapt and fight with relentless fury. No one had dared to disturb their slumber for a reason. "Zix," Zix repeated, his voice more urgent this time. "Stop the scan now. This is no ordinary ship. The readings are wrong." But the junior researcher was too focused on the data to heed his warning. The hum of the ship's systems grew louder, and Zix felt a strange sensation vibrating through the deck. The energy from the human ship seemed to pulse in response to the scan, as if it were reacting to the intrusion. A soft flicker of light swept across the holographic projection, and for a brief moment, Zix swore he saw the human ship shift ever so slightly. The sense of wrongness he had felt earlier intensified, crawling under his crystalline skin. "Commander, something's happening." Blue, The communications officer said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm getting unusual feedback from the ship's systems. It's as if it's aware of the scan. The energy signature has spiked." Sith's antennae twitched in alarm. He could feel the air growing dense, thick with an almost palpable energy. It was unlike anything he had experienced in his long career. The ship was responding, and not in any way they had anticipated. A low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the walls of the research vessel, and for a moment, Sith thought the entire ship was going to tremble apart. Then, without warning, a blinding flash of light erupted from the human warship. It wasn't just a flare. It was as if the ship had exploded into life. The glow from the ship filled the display with a brilliant, almost otherworldly radiance, and for a fraction of a second, Sith thought he saw something move inside the ship's hull. "Zix, what have you done?" Sith demanded, his voice sharp, his crystalline appendages glowing a bright, angry red as he reached for the control panel to abort the scan. "I didn't mean to. The data just spiked, and I thought we were missing something important." Zix stammered, his once confident demeanor now replaced by a cold sweat on his brow. "I'm trying to shut it down, but the system is resisting. It's like the ship wants to wake up." The energy surge continued, and Sith could feel the oppressive weight of it pressing against his very being. It was unlike anything he had encountered before. The human ship wasn't just responding to their scan, it was fighting back. The faint energy pulses from the ship had turned into violent, rapid waves, emanating from its core and rippling outward. The ship's ancient technology was stirring, waking up from a long, deep slumber. "Commander," Blue's voice was barely audible over the hum. "The ship, it's moving. It's not just a defensive reaction. It's repositioning itself. The systems are coming online. The human ship, it's alive again." Sith's heart raced. This wasn't just about a ship waking from sleep. It was something much more. The human vessel had been dormant for centuries, a relic of a time long gone, and yet here it was, alive and responding to their intrusion. "Get me a full scan of their internal systems now." Sith ordered, his voice a controlled mix of authority and fear. "Do not touch anything. We are not equipped to handle whatever is happening." But as the crew scrambled to comply, Sith's worst fears began to materialize. On the display, the human ship's lights began to flicker in strange patterns, as if some internal mechanism had suddenly activated. The energy signature stabilized into a new, steady rhythm, one that Sith recognized from the old legends, a frequency tied to advanced human technology. It was a pulse of command, a signal of readiness. "Commander, the energy levels are spiking again." Green, the sensor officer, called out, her voice tight with panic. "This isn't just a power-up. They're sending out a signal, something far beyond anything we've seen before. It's calling to something." Sith's mind raced. A signal. But to who? Humanity had been asleep for so long. Who could they be contacting? What had they left behind? Could this signal be reaching across time and space to their homeworld, or worse, could it be a beacon to attract something far worse? His gaze was fixed on the ship, now fully illuminated and humming with purpose. His instincts screamed at him that they had done something irreversible. This was no mere exploration. They had disturbed a sleeping giant, and now that giant was awakening, pulling itself from the depths of its long slumber. "I have to report this," Sith muttered under his breath, turning to face his crew. "We've broken the most sacred rule in the galaxy, and now we must face the consequences." The moment the words left his mouth, the ship's internal lights flickered one final time, and a sound like the clashing of thunder filled the command deck. It was then that Sith understood. Humanity had been sleeping for a reason. They were not just survivors. They were something much more dangerous than that. The call of the awakened. The air in the control room was thick with tension, the hum of the systems blending into a constant, oppressive sound that seemed to reverberate in Sith's very being. The human warship, once a dormant, forgotten relic, was now alive, its systems firing up with a steady pulse that vibrated through the very fabric of space. The energy readings had surpassed any level of expectation, and with each passing moment, the consequences of their actions became more apparent. Could feel his crystalline form tremble with a mixture of dread and awe. His crew, once confident in their knowledge of the galaxy, now seemed lost, their faces drawn with uncertainty. The fear that had been a whisper before now echoed through the room. The ancient warship was awake, and with it, the specter of humanity's legendary power. "Commander, the ship is communicating," Blue reported, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to utter the words aloud. "But it's not like any transmission we've ever encountered. The signal, it's not just data. It's alive." Turned sharply to her, his crystalline eyes wide with concern. "Alive? What do you mean?" "I can feel it, Commander," Blue continued, her antennae flicking nervously. "It's a pattern, but there's something strange about it. It's almost sentient. It's like the ship itself is trying to communicate, but not in any conventional way." His mind raced. He had studied human technology, of course. He had seen the stories, the myths, but this was something new. He had never encountered a form of communication like this, something so raw and primal, as if the ship itself was alive and reaching out. "Prepare a direct link," Ziv ordered, his voice strained. "If this is a message, we need to understand it before it escalates further." The crew scrambled to make the necessary adjustments. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood motionless, waiting for the transmission to stabilize. The human ship had once been a passive entity, but now it felt like it was breathing, shifting, responding to something beyond their comprehension. A low hum began to fill the room, growing louder with each passing second, as though the very walls of the ship were vibrating in harmony with the warship's awakening. Then, without warning, a flash of light exploded from the center of the display. A wave of energy pulsed outward from the human ship, rippling through the station's sensors with such force that several of the crew stumbled backward, their systems momentarily overwhelmed. His voice cut through the chaos, calm but firm. "Status report." "What was that?" "Commander," Green said, her voice tight with panic. "The energy surge just. It's spreading. The entire sector is affected. The human ship is sending out a massive pulse. Our systems are going haywire. I can't stabilize the data." The ship was alive, and whatever force was driving it was far more advanced than anything could comprehend. It was as if the human warship was seeking something, reaching out to its surroundings, something deep in the universe, something lost and forgotten. "Initiate emergency shutdowns," St ordered. "Seal off the control room and ensure all systems are secure. I need to understand what we're dealing with before this escalates further." As his crew worked to follow his orders, Zith's mind raced. Humanity had long been thought to be a species that had either died out or remained dormant in their cryosleep, leaving nothing behind but memories and myths. Yet here they were, in front of him, challenging everything he had learned in his long years of exploration. He had read the stories. Humans have been ferocious fighters, incredible survivors, and cunning tacticians, but they had been dormant. Until now. What had changed? Why had the ship awakened? "Commander, you need to see this," Officer Zix called out, his voice thick with excitement and fear. "The human ship, it's reaching out through the fabric of space. It's not just sending signals, it's connecting with something." His heart raced. "Connecting with what? What do you mean?" "We're getting reports from the outer perimeter," Zix said, his voice trembling as he ran the data. "The signals are being received by others. There's a ripple effect through the fabric of space itself. The human ship is broadcasting in a way that extends beyond our sensors, beyond this system. It's like a calling, reaching across the galaxy." His thoughts went into overdrive. The legends had always said that humans had the ability to send out a signal, a call to arms, an invitation to the galaxies, but he had always assumed it was a myth. Now, the truth seemed to be more terrifying than he had imagined. The human warship wasn't just an isolated relic. It was a beacon, reaching out, pulling in other forces. "What have we done?" Blue whispered, as the entire ship seemed to hum with an unsettling energy. "Prepare for the worst," Sith said, his voice grim as he turned to face his crew. "If they are calling out, truly calling out, then the galaxy may not be ready for what's about to arrive." Suddenly, the holographic display flickered again. Sith's antennae stiffened as the ship's readings shifted. The human vessel was no longer the only one broadcasting. A faint, distant signal appeared on the outer edges of their systems, an answer, perhaps, to the human warship's call. But it was no ordinary response. I'm getting another reading, sir," Green said, her voice shaken. It's coming from multiple points across the galaxy. Ships. Coming toward us." Sith's breath caught in his throat as the implications hit him all at once. The human ship had awakened, and now it was not alone. Whatever had been stirred from the depths of its long sleep was reaching out, and the galaxy was about to be caught in its web. "Activate all defensive measures," Sith ordered, his voice steady despite the storm raging within. "Prepare for contact. Prepare for whatever is coming." The universe had one rule: don't wake the humans. And now, the galaxy would pay the price for breaking it.